Well, joining us now is the leader of the federal NDP, Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, good to see you again.
Thank you so much.
Now, listening to your press conference today, you talk about being careful to avoid attacking Mr. Johnston personally. But by saying that there is this apprehension of bias about the man, are you not attacking his character and whether or not he's actually trustworthy to do the job?
No, this is a question about the appearance, and this is something that we studied very carefully in law school. Mr. Johnston himself is someone who has done a great service to the country, but his job is to restore confidence in the public when it comes to foreign interference. And in that job, the appearance of a bias undermines his ability to do that. And at this point, there is such a mounting appearance of bias that it puts his position in such a way it's no longer tenable for him to be able to continue to restore confidence, because people can't believe what he's doing because of that appearance of bias in a moment when Canadians need to see impartiality, someone who is free from any sort of bias. And that appearance is so strong that it really undermines his work.
But are you putting the cart before the horse on this one? Because, you know, you're asking Mr. Johnston to step aside before seeing the security and intelligence documents upon which he based his report. How fair is it to ask him to essentially step down without that information first, especially since you have agreed to look at those documents?
I have agreed, and I think it's the right thing to do. That would be the case if I was basing my finding of an appearance of bias on his conclusions. But the appearance of bias isn't in his conclusions, it's in the appearance of the work around that. The fact that the chief lawyer that he engaged, the person that was there for all the meetings, that did the analysis of documents, helped him with the report writing, was a Liberal donor for basically every election since the early 2000s. That is something that has a very clear evidence-based appearance of bias that would undermine the public's ability to trust the outcome. On top of that, I'm not looking at the conclusions of the report, but some of the nature of the report, where the chief lawyer was a strong Liberal supporter. In the report, the government's word on things is accepted without any pushback. The government's own position on something is accepted and then repeated in the report without any critique or questioning. All of that, coupled with the lawyer, gives an appearance of a bias that is not dependent on the outcome or the conclusions, but is just on the appearance of the work being done and those doing the work.
Oh, okay, but you know, the appearance aside, if you give it a third-party review, that it may help the appearance. And you know, Mr. Johnston himself, he's calling on the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency, also for NSICOP, to review his conclusions, and he actually does say that those two bodies should speak out publicly if they don't agree with his conclusions. Why not let them do their work before coming to this motion?
I think that work is important, but given the fact that Mr. Johnston is the one that is running the show, has been entrusted with this important position, and that the appearance of bias is so strong, it no longer gives him the ability to restore confidence. The whole exercise here was to take the allegations of foreign interference seriously, to give Canadians confidence that we're doing something about it. But when the person doing something about it is clouded with this appearance of bias, then the public can't trust the work that's being done, and it doesn't restore confidence. It's why we said from the beginning that even the choice of having a special rapporteur was the wrong one. What should have been done is a public inquiry. It has a rigor, cross-examination, witnesses' testimony under oath. And that level of rigor and vigor gives Canadians more confidence. And we saw that with the Rouleau Commission, how that gave Canadians, minus the most extreme fringes, confidence that the decision around the Emergencies Act was one that was taken in a good way, and the assessment of that was done in such a way where Canadians were given a sense of confidence in decision-making and what led to that moment.
Okay, but you keep talking about this appearance of bias, but are you just not feeding into that rather than supporting a former Governor General in his work? Are you not destroying his reputation by constantly saying that there's an appearance of bias against him?
Well, it's not about Mr. Johnston's track record. It's not about his position. He has served the country, there's no doubt. But when the question is about his analysis of the government's actions, did the government do the right thing or the wrong thing? And when the chief lawyer that worked with him, that did a lot of the analysis, is someone that was a Liberal donor, it's hard for Canadians to believe that the decisions are being made in a way that doesn't have any bias when there's so much.
Do you
of
think
an
there's
appearance
bias,
of
though? Do you think there's bias?
Well, and this is something I learned when I studied this in law school. It's not about whether there is or is not bias. The appearance of bias undermines justice. And in this case, it's about restoring confidence in addition to justice, and that confidence is absolutely eroded because of the appearance. And the appearance is quite strong at this point. It does look like there's a bias, whether there is one or not. And that appearance is so strong that you just can't move forward at this point.
Okay, but you are calling once again for a public inquiry, and I have to say, you were asked this in the press conference, but you do lead the party, the only party really, that can actually force this government to bring about a public inquiry. You can do that by withdrawing your support of the supply and confidence agreement. Why not use that hammer? If this truly is about getting a public inquiry, why not use that hammer now?
Well, ultimately, the hammer that I have isn't just the agreement, it's forcing a vote. Because as people have mentioned, if the agreement is no longer there, the government functions like a minority government. And then they look for support from different parties on confidence votes. So there is no real hammer there. The real hammer is triggering an election. And I don't think it makes any sense to trigger an election when the concerns are about interference in an election, unless measures are taken to safeguard our election. Then it would seem to be very self-serving. My goal is not to force an election. My goal is to force a public inquiry to restore confidence in our electoral system, to protect it, to make sure that there is no interference. And without any new measures being taken, without any recommendations in place that safeguard our democracy, it would be counterproductive. If the goal, like I think that Mr. Poilievre's goal, is just to find an excuse for an election, sure. But my goal isn't to find an excuse for an election. My goal is truly to reinforce and strengthen our democracy. And to do that, the goal of triggering an election is not one that achieves it. And why would I remove the pressure I have on the government to deliver things like dental care, pharmacare, support for workers? The government doesn't want to do that. The Liberals don't want to do any of these things. We're forcing them to do that. Really, what we have is an agreement for the Liberals to do what we force them to do. I don't want to give away the tool that we have to force them when we know that the government on their own wouldn't have done any of these things.
Jagmeet Singh, thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you.